She is ugly and will never marry." The words fell like cold iron in the small mountain cabin, sharp and final. Martha Caldwell spoke them with pleasure, as if saying them made them true. She stood near the fireplace, her back straight, her mouth tight with pride. She wanted the words to hurt, and they did. Sarah knelt on the rough wooden floor, scrubbing with a worn brush. Her hands were red from lye soap, her knees aching through thin cloth. She did not look up. She had learned long ago that silence was safer than answers. Still, the words sank deep, settling in her chest like a heavy stone. The cabin was small and dark, built from old logs and filled with years of smoke and sorrow. This had once been her father's home. Now it felt like a place she did not belong. Since his death 3 winters ago, Sarah had become little more than a servant. She cooked, cleaned, hauled water, and kept quiet. That was her place. "Make sure the floor shines," Martha continued. "Josiah Stone will be here soon." At that name, Sarah's hands slowed. Everyone in the mountains knew Josiah Stone. They called him the Mountain King. He was rich in land and skill, respected by trappers and traders alike. Some said he had once been a gentleman back east. Others claimed sorrow had driven him into the wild. No one knew the truth, only that he was powerful, quiet, and alone. Martha adjusted her shawl and smiled to herself. "Of course, my daughter Charity will greet him. She will wear her green dress. You, Sarah, will stay out of sight. I will not have you embarrassing us." Sarah swallowed hard. Charity was everything Martha praised. Fair-haired, well-fed, dressed in clean wool. Sarah was the opposite. Her brown dress was patched again and again. Her hair was tied back with a faded red ribbon, the last thing her father had given her. Sarah's father had once taken her into the woods, teaching her the names of plants and birds. He had called her his little mountain rose. Those days felt like another life. "Do not forget your place," Martha said sharply. "You are lucky to be here at all." Sarah nodded, though her throat burned. She kept scrubbing until the boards shone dull and clean. Outside, the mountains rose high and silent, dusted with early snow. They were beautiful, but they felt like walls. When hoofbeats sounded in the clearing, Sarah's heart began to race. She gathered her bucket quickly, planning to slip away to the barn as ordered. But in her haste, her elbow struck the pail. Water spilled across the floor, spreading fast. "Oh no," she whispered, dropping to her knees. Cold water soaked her dress as she tried to stop it. Panic filled her chest. Martha's anger would be fierce. The cabin door opened. Martha stepped in, already drawing breath to shout. But she was not alone. A tall man filled the doorway, broad-shouldered and still. He wore buckskin and moved with calm strength. His hair was dark with threads of silver. His eyes were gray, deep and watchful, like a coming storm. Josiah Stone had arrived. Sarah froze where she knelt, soaked and shaking, staring at the floor. Shame burned through her. She wished the ground would open and take her away. "I am so sorry," Martha rushed to say, her voice suddenly sweet. "The girl is careless. She knows no better. Sarah, leave at once." Josiah did not answer her right away. His gaze was fixed on the girl kneeling in the water. "This appears to be a young woman in distress," he said calmly. His voice was steady, not harsh. He stepped forward and held out his hand. "Please," he said, "let me help you up." Sarah stared at his hand, rough and scarred, yet offered without doubt or judgment. No one had ever helped her before. "Not like this." "I am nobody," she whispered, barely able to speak. "I should not trouble you." Josiah frowned slightly. "I doubt that." She looked up then, just for a moment. Their eyes met. There was no mockery in his gaze, no pity, only respect. Martha's smile tightened. "She is only my stepchild," she said quickly. "A burden, really." Josiah's eyes flicked to Martha, then back to Sarah. Something unreadable passed through his expression. "Everyone has worth," he said quietly, "no matter what they are told." Sarah's breath caught. The words felt unreal, like something from a storybook. Before more could be said, Martha ordered Sarah away. Sarah gathered her things and fled to the barn, her heart pounding. Behind her, voices murmured, but she could not hear the words. That night, as she lay on her narrow cot, Sarah touched the red ribbon in her hair. For the first time in years, a small, dangerous thought crept into her heart. What if Martha was wrong? Outside, the mountains stood silent under the stars, holding secrets yet to be revealed. Morning came softly to the mountains, pale light slipping through pine branches and resting on the narrow meadow Sarah loved most. She knelt among the wild roses, her fingers careful as she tied a broken stem to a thin willow stick. This place had been her refuge since girlhood, hidden from sharp words and watchful eyes. Here she could breathe. She did not hear him at first. "You have gentle hands." The voice came from behind her, calm and deep. Sarah gasped and turned so quickly she nearly dropped her water gourd. Josiah Stone stood a few steps away, his great black horse waiting at the edge of the trees like a shadow come alive. "I am sorry," Sarah said at once, embarrassed. "I did not know anyone was here." "I walk quietly," Josiah replied. "It comes from long years in the woods." He looked around the meadow, at the roses she had tended back from ruin after the storm. "You care for what others forget," he said. "That tells me much about you." Sarah lowered her eyes. Praise made her uneasy. "They were damaged," she said softly. "I only did what I could." Josiah stepped closer, careful not to disturb her work. "Your stepmother spoke harshly to you yesterday." Sarah's hands stilled. She felt that old familiar fear rise again. "She speaks truth," she said. "I am plain. I am only a burden." Josiah's jaw tightened. "I have seen burdens," he said. "They do not look like you." She dared to look up then. His gray eyes held concern, not judgment. Something in her chest loosened. They spoke longer than Sarah realized, about the plants, about the mountains, about her father and the lessons he had given her. She told him how she read to the children at the small mountain school, how their eyes lit up when she spoke of faraway places. Josiah listened, as if every word mattered. "I would like to see this school," he said finally. "May I walk with you next time?" Sarah hesitated. "It would not be proper." "I care little for what others call proper," he replied. "I care for what is right." The next week passed like a dream. Josiah met her often, always in open places, always with respect. He walked beside her to the schoolhouse, where the children stared in awe at the famous mountain man. He listened as Sarah read, smiling when the children laughed, frowning when they struggled. He brought slate boards, new books, pencils. The schoolmaster wept openly when Josiah promised more help. But joy rarely comes without cost. Martha noticed the change in Sarah, the light in her eyes, the way she moved with new confidence. And she hated it. Silas Crowder, the hired hand, whispered what he had seen. Meetings, smiles. Josiah Stone listening to Sarah as if she were worth hearing. Martha's mouth twisted with rage. "She thinks herself clever," she told Charity. "But I will remind her who she is." The punishments grew worse, more work, less food, cruel words spoken louder, sharper. Sarah bore it in silence, though each day tested her strength. Josiah saw the bruises on her hands, the tired way she walked. His concern turned to anger. "This cannot continue," he said one evening as they stood near the schoolhouse. "You are not safe there." "I have no other place," Sarah replied. "I am grateful for what I have." Josiah shook his head. Gratitude should not be demanded through cruelty. That night he made a decision. The Miller Harvest celebration was the largest gathering of the season. Everyone attended. Music, food, dancing. It was where fortunes rose or fell. Sarah had never been allowed to go. The day before the celebration, Josiah placed a small bundle in her hands. Red ribbons, new and bright. "For your hair," he said. "Wear them tomorrow." "I cannot attend," Sarah whispered. "Martha forbids it." "She does not own the world," Josiah replied, "and she does not own you." That night, Sarah found a blue wool dress hidden behind the woodshed, carefully made, beautiful. She pressed it to her chest, trembling with hope and fear. Martha's voice carried through the cabin walls. "Tomorrow," she said with satisfaction, "I will end this foolishness." The celebration hall glowed with candlelight. Laughter and music filled the air. When Sarah stepped inside, the room seemed to still. She wore the blue dress, the red ribbons. Her posture was straight, though her hands shook. Whispers followed her, some mocking, some surprised. Martha appeared at her side, smiling coldly. "You dare show your face?" Before Sarah could answer, Josiah crossed the room. "Miss Caldwell," he said clearly, "may I have this dance?" The room erupted in gasps. Martha's smile cracked. Sarah placed her hand in his. As they moved across the floor, Josiah leaned close. "Trust me." The music ended. Josiah did not release her hand. He turned to face the crowd. "I have watched long enough," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "I have seen how worth is measured by shallow eyes." He looked at Sarah. "This woman has more courage, kindness, and strength than anyone I know." Martha tried to speak. Josiah raised his hand. "I choose her." Silence fell like snow. Josiah dropped to one knee. "Sarah Caldwell," he said, "will you be my wife?" Tears blurred her vision. Her whole life pressed into that moment. "Yes," she whispered. The room exploded with sound. Some cheers, some anger, some stunned silence. Martha stood frozen, her power shattered. As Josiah rose and drew Sarah into his arms, the mountains outside stood witness. The girl called ugly had been chosen, and nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after the harvest celebration dawned quiet and gray, as if the mountains themselves were unsure how to greet the change that had come. Mist clung to the ridges, rolling low through the valleys like a living thing. Sarah sat alone on the edge of Josiah's cabin porch, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her heart still racing from the night before. She kept expecting to wake up, back on the hard cot in Martha's house, to hear the sharp voice calling her useless, to feel the cold floor beneath her knees. But instead she smelled fresh pine, heard the soft creak of the cabin, and felt the steady warmth of a place that did not reject her. Inside, Josiah moved quietly, giving her space. He understood that years of fear do not vanish in a single night, no matter how bright the promise. When he stepped outside, he did not speak at first. He simply sat beside her, his presence calm and solid, like the mountains that surrounded them. "You are thinking of leaving," he said gently. Sarah's breath caught. "I do not know how to stay," she admitted. "My whole life I learned how to endure, not how to belong." Josiah turned toward her fully. "You belong where you are cherished," he said. "That is all there is to it." Tears slid down Sarah's cheeks, but she did not hide them. For once, there was no punishment waiting for weakness. News of the proposal spread quickly. Some praised Josiah's courage. Others whispered that he had been tricked by pity. Martha made sure those whispers grew loud. She visited neighbors, shaking her head with false sorrow. She spoke of Sarah's ingratitude, of her flaws, of how easily she had deceived a lonely man. Old habits died hard, and Martha could not stand losing control. But something unexpected happened. The people began to remember. They remembered Sarah reading to their children when no one else had time. They remembered her tending sick neighbors without complaint. They remembered kindness they had taken for granted. Slowly, the whispers changed. The wedding was planned for early spring, when the snow melted and the mountain paths cleared. It would be simple. Sarah insisted on that. She wanted no display that felt like revenge. The ceremony was held in the open meadow, where wild roses bloomed, the same place her father once took her to learn the names of flowers. The day was clear and bright, the sky wide and forgiving. Sarah wore a modest white dress, sewn by the same hands that once patched her rags. The red ribbon was woven into her hair brighter than ever. When Josiah took her hands, his grip was steady. "I choose you," he said, his voice carrying across the meadow. "Not despite your past, but because of the strength it gave you." Sarah looked at the faces around her, faces that once looked away, faces that now watched with something close to awe. "I choose you," she said, "for seeing me when I could not see myself." The vows were spoken. The promise was sealed. And with it, a life ended and another began. Marriage did not erase Sarah's fears overnight. There were mornings she woke, expecting harsh words. There were moments when kindness still startled her, but Josiah never rushed her healing. Their home became a place of warmth and laughter. The mountain school grew under Sarah's care, filled with children who believed they mattered because she told them so. One evening, months later, Martha arrived at their door. She looked smaller than Sarah remembered, older, her pride worn thin by time and bitterness. "I deserve some credit," Martha said stiffly. "I raised you." Sarah met her gaze calmly. "You kept me," she replied. "That is not the same." Martha's mouth tightened. "I was protecting you from disappointment." "You were protecting yourself," Sarah said softly. "And I forgive you, but I will not return to that life." Martha left with nothing but her pride, and even that was cracked. Charity came later, quiet and unsure. Sarah welcomed her without blame. The cycle of cruelty ended where compassion began. Years passed. Sarah stood again in the rose meadow, her hands resting over a growing belly, the future alive within her. Josiah watched her from the cabin, his heart full. "You saved me," he said one night as they sat by the fire. She shook her head. "You believed me," she replied. "That is different." The red ribbon still hung by the door, faded now but never forgotten. Sarah had been called ugly, worthless, unmarriageable. But love had spoken louder. And the mountains remembered her not as the girl who knelt in shame, but as the woman who rose, was chosen, and finally chose herself.